The emergency bay of the Celestial Mercy reeked of burnt scales and ionized plasma. Elian pressed his trembling hands against the med scanner, watching another critical patient flatline, despite his best efforts. 72 hours. That's how long he'd been awake, stitching wounds that defied human comprehension, administering xenobiotics he'd learned about 3 days ago, and watching species he couldn't pronounce die on his table. The Crithian conflict had turned brutal fast. What started as a border dispute had erupted into full-scale war, and the coalition medical frigate Celestial Mercy found itself overwhelmed with casualties from a dozen different species. Elian was the only human medic aboard. Humans were still the new kids in the galactic community, barely trusted with anything beyond menial labor. But when the head surgeon took shrapnel to the thorax, Elian was all they had. He stumbled toward the decontamination chamber, his vision blurring. The ship's AI chimed softly, announcing another incoming transport. Elian wanted to scream. Instead, he steadied himself against the bulkhead and whispered, "How many?" 14 wounded. Priority Alpha. Of course, they were Priority Alpha. Everything was Priority Alpha now. The transport bay doors hissed open, releasing a wave of smoke and the acrid smell of combat. Elian's team, what remained of it, rushed forward with gurneys. Most of the wounded were Crithian soldiers, their crystalline exoskeletons cracked and leaking bioluminescent fluid. But at the back of the transport, partially hidden beneath a torn tarp, something moved. "Got one more here," shouted Nurse Vec, a 6-armed Pleiadian who'd been working alongside Elian since the crisis began. Elian approached and pulled back the tarp. His breath caught. It was a dragon. Not metaphorically. Not some alien species that vaguely resembled Earth mythology. An actual dragon, scaled, winged, with horns barely beginning to emerge from its skull. But it was small, no larger than a human toddler, with iridescent purple scales that flickered weakly in the harsh medical lighting. Its right wing hung at a grotesque angle, and a deep gash ran along its flank, exposing muscle and bone beneath. "Cirrus species," Vec muttered, tentacles curling in what Elian had learned was anxiety. "They're protected. Ancient. This is bad." Elian had heard rumors about the Cirrus. Sentient dragons from the Andromeda sector, neutral in all conflicts. Worshipped by some species as living gods. Seeing one injured in a war zone was like finding a wounded unicorn in a minefield, impossible, and deeply wrong. The creature's eyes enormous and golden, with vertical slits fixed on Elian. Its chest heaved with labored breathing. Without thinking, Elian reached out, his medic instincts overriding his exhaustion. "Easy," he whispered, even though he knew it couldn't understand him. "Easy now." He began the examination with practiced efficiency. Fractured wing, definitely. Lacerations across the torso, severe but survivable. Possible internal bleeding. He called for plasma expanders and a bone knitter. His hands moving on autopilot as his mind calculated dosages for a species he'd only read about in xenobiology primers. The dragon whimpered. A sound that vibrated through Elian's chest like a physical thing. Then it began to sob great, heaving cries that were heartbreakingly childlike despite the alien vocal cords producing them. Tears, actual tears, rolled down its scaled snout. Elian's hands stilled. In 72 hours of carnage, he'd maintained his professional distance. He'd sealed his emotions behind a wall of medical jargon and procedure. But something about those tears, about the universal language of a child's suffering, cracked him open. "I know," he said softly, resuming his work even as his own eyes burned. "I know it hurts. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The dragon's sobbing intensified. Its small body shook, wings trembling. And then, "Mother," Elian froze. The bone knitter clattered from his hand. The word hadn't been spoken aloud. It had appeared directly in his mind, carried on a wave of emotion so profound that Elian felt his knees buckle. Grief, loneliness, terror. The child, because that's what it was. A child was calling for its mother. She burned, The voice continued, each word a knife of pure anguish. Ship burned. Mother burned. Screaming stopped. Telepathy. The Cirrus were telepathic. Elian had read that, somewhere in the blur of briefing documents. But reading it, and experiencing it, were universes apart. The dragon's mind brushed against his. And Elian felt everything. The moment the civilian transport was struck, the searing heat, the mother dragon shielding her child with her body, the terrible silence that followed. Hurts, Cirrus whimpered. Everything hurts. Want mother. Want home. Elian's vision swam with tears he'd been holding back for 3 days. His hands shook as he picked up the bone knitter again. Around him, the medical bay continued its organized chaos. But in this moment, there was only him and this broken child who'd lost everything. I know, baby, Elian whispered, and felt the dragon's mind cling to his words like a lifeline. I know you want your mother. I can't bring her back. I'm so sorry, but I can help you. I can make the hurt less. Will you let me? A pause. I promise, Elian's voice cracked. I'm a doctor. Humans, we're stubborn like that. We don't give up. I won't give up on you. He felt the dragon's fear recede slightly, replaced by something fragile and cautious. Hope. Maybe. Or just exhaustion. Elian worked through his tears. He set the wing with precision that belied his shaking hands. He sealed the lacerations with biomesh. He administered pain medication in carefully calculated doses. And through it all, he kept up a steady stream of gentle words, feeling the dragon's consciousness wrapped around his own like a frightened child clutching a parent's hand. Name? The voice asked, softer now. Elian. My name is Elian. Elian. The dragon's mind tested the word, finding comfort in it. You smell like hope. Tired hope. Hurt. Hope. But hope won. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the grief, the weight of 72 impossible hours, Elian laughed. It was a broken sound, but genuine. Yeah, kid. That's humanity for you. Too stupid to know when we're beaten. The dragon's sobbing had quieted to occasional hiccups. Its breathing steadied as the pain medication took effect. Those golden eyes remained fixed on Elian's face. Stay? It asked plaintively. Elian glanced at the triage board. 14 more patients waiting. A war that wouldn't pause for grief. A galaxy that saw humans as barely competent. But in this moment, faced with a child's need, there was only one answer a decent being could give. Yeah, Cirrus. I'll stay. He pulled up a stool beside the medical pod and rested his hand near the dragon's head, careful not to touch the healing wounds. The dragon shifted slightly, pressing its snout against his palm. Thank you, tired hope, whispered the voice in his mind. Elian closed his eyes for just a moment, allowing himself this small peace. Tomorrow, the war would continue. Tomorrow, he'd save who he could, and mourn who he couldn't. But tonight, he'd kept one promise to one scared child. Sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, that was everything.